evening, everyone. Hope you liked my sick drum solo. It's nice to see you all again. My name is Patrick Smith, and I am the host and curator of Movie Club, and I am delighted to welcome you to yet another installment of Movie Club tonight. But before we get started, obviously, can't forget the jacket. Now things are back to normal. Maybe we should add a little bit more of a cool element to the show, because I don't think I'm doing it on my own. How about this? Does this make me look like a cool concert jazz drummer? No? Okay. How about these bad boys? Like hunky Tom Cruise from the 80s, like Top Gun era Tom Cruise? No? Okay. We'll just go with no glasses. That'll be fun. With all that goofing around out of the way, welcome yet again to Movie Club. Tonight we have the pleasure to continue our Club Member Select series with another brilliant selection, this time thanks to Jacob Mahabza. I'm talking, of course, of the 2014 fantastic film from Damien and Chazelle, Whiplash, starring Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons. Now, this film gets some of the best performances out of its entire cast. We have cameo appearances from the likes of Paul Reiser, who is a fantastic character actor in and of himself. But here we also get the likes of the inimitable J.K. Simmons, who is here to eat scenery. He is incredible in the role of Terrence Fletcher, an unhinged music director who is willing to go to whatever lengths necessary in order to find and create greatness. His most recent victim is a drummer by the name of Andrew Neiman, who is played by Miles Teller in this film. Both actors are giving their all in this, whether it's little tiny facial expressions or the absolute rage that erupts whenever they get frustrated. It's incredible to watch the chemistry between these two actors as they do some of the best work in their career. I mean, this might be the movie that defines J.K. Simmons' career. Prior to this, I mean, you probably only saw him in those Farmers Insurance commercials. And if you're as old as I am, you probably grew up watching him play J. Jonah Jameson Jr., the crazy tyrannical leader of the Daily Bugle in the Spider-Man movies from Sam Raimi in the early 2000s. He was perfect for that role, and just in taking that piece of information, I mean, the casting here is pitch perfect. This is a fast-paced, brilliant film that wastes not a single frame. It's one of the tightest scripts I've seen in years, and has some of the most degrading insults I've ever heard put to film. Some critics likened J.K. Simmons' performance as Terrence Fletcher in Whiplash to R. Lee Ermey's performance as Gunnery Sergeant Hartman in Full Metal Jacket. Full Metal Jacket is, of course, the fantastic war film from Stanley Kubrick, one of several, of course, that we just heard discussed in the Life Itself documentary that we watched just a couple weeks ago. And if you've seen the movie, Gunnery Sergeant Hartman is not a good guy. He produces results, he gets results, but at what cost? Many critics liken these two characters and the way they got the results to the process of devolving humanity. They're willing to sacrifice what is typically the boundaries that we assume as humans and how we interact with each other in order to achieve greatness, in order to find and create and forge good and great art. And that's one of the main questions that this film poses. Is the results that Fletcher gets worth it? Obviously, I can't answer that question for you. And I'm not going to tell you how I feel about it in order to sway you either way. I think this is a fantastic film that delves very intimately and intricately into abusive relationships. This time, albeit not a romantic one, but this is definitely a film that talks about how toxic relationships that are built on abuse after abuse can spiral out of control and damage all parties involved. And watching how Miles Teller's Andrew Neiman devolves as a human throughout the film as he gets deeper and deeper into this abusive relationship, trying to appease and gain the approval of Fletcher, is hard to watch. You want Neiman to succeed as a drummer. You want him to achieve his dreams. I mean, this is effectively a sports film, just without the sports, and a lot more jazz. Jazz hands. You want Neiman to succeed in that regard. The problem is that his success is at the cost of his humanity. It's these kinds of films that ask us deeper questions and force us to confront ourselves about how we would react in these situations. No one wants to be in an abusive relationship like this, but the way that Fletcher eases all of his victims into that relationship makes you understand how people could get caught in the crosshairs of that. And yet we still want Neiman to succeed, because that's what these stories condition us to believe. That's what these stories condition us to want. Now, this isn't the first feature from Damien Chazelle. I've previously mentioned his next feature, La La Land, in the intro for Moonlight, and the controversy that caused. I still love that film, just not as much as Moonlight. And I assume eventually we'll get around to that, because that's another film that has a fantastic and controversial ending. Likewise, his most recent feature, First Man, starring, once again, Ryan Gosling as Neil Armstrong, and that biopic is maybe one of the most interesting biopics I've ever seen. I would also be remiss if I didn't talk, at least for a brief moment, about Justin Hurwitz's brilliant score for this film. Now, he didn't create all the original pieces here. Some of these were pre-existing big band pieces, but most of the contributions to just intermittent score and the big band pieces are from Justin Hurwitz, who would go on to work with Chazelle again in La La Land and, of course, First Man. Another quick fun fact before I leave you and before we start the screening once and for all is you might be surprised at one of the early logos that pops up before the film begins. I'm of course talking about the Blumhouse logo, which we've seen a couple times here at Movie Club during our screenings. We've most recently seen this logo before the film Get Out. It's interesting to see Jason Blum and his production company appear here, but once we get into the film, you can understand why Jason Blum might have been attracted to this idea. And you know what? Regardless of his reasoning, I'm glad he did, because the film that we got is genius. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's screening here at Movie Club. I'm talking, of course, about the 2014 Damien Chazelle directed masterpiece that is Whiplash.